all, let me express my deep gratitude to the Maha Bodhi Society of India. I've met so many of you now personally following my visit to India earlier this year. I want to particularly thank Venerable Sivali for very kindly gracing this occasion and also inviting me to be a participant here. So I'm deeply honored. And greetings from London on this very auspicious day, the birthday of a very great lady, Mary Elizabeth Michaela Robinson Foster. So we have very recently celebrated or marked the 161st birth anniversary of our great founder, Anagarika Dharmapala, this week in London, and I'm sure you've done similar celebrations in India as well. So this is a very apt time to have this seminar and this topic, and I applaud you for conducting this, and the title is very apt. So these two people are really responsible for very much of the Buddhist world that we live in today. Without them, the world of Buddhism would be so much less. It would be a diminished world without their efforts and their work. They are clearly towering people from the past, and their meeting and their work together cannot be underestimated. So, if I may, I'll talk a little bit about Anagarika Dharmapala in a broad sense, and then I will talk about Mary Foster, and then I will talk about their work and what it means for the future of Buddhism as we live it out today in the modern world. There seems to be some noise. Is everyone able to mute themselves, please?
Deepak Chaudhary ji, kindly mute yourself.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Anagarika Dharmapala is a very complex person. He led a very complex life. There are very many facets to his life. It's a multifaceted life. But in everything that he partook, he was prolific, whether it was in speeches, in writings, in travel, in his engagements with other people. He was always active. It was a restless life that was irrepressible. It was relentless. And that is, for me, the most fundamental characteristic of his life. He did not know how to stop. He would just carry on regardless of any personal anguish that he was suffering, whether it was his health or his circumstances. His pursuit of the sublime truths of Buddhism and the teaching and spreading the teaching of the Buddha's Dhamma was relentless. And it's difficult to see of anyone after him who has got the same character that meets those criteria, really. So it's just such a remarkable life, and every time I look at his life, I learn something new. It is really quite amazing. And the perspective that, for example, that I have of Anagarika may be quite different from the people of India. Yourselves have Anagarika Dharmapala, and indeed the people in Sri Lanka have possibly a different perspective, and the rest of the world also, because he means so many things to so many people. I think the common perception was that he's a Buddhism of protest who lived at a time when the colonial powers were in the ascendancy, and Buddhism as a whole was under threat, especially in his homeland of Sri Lanka. It was in a disastrous state in India. The whole religion had more or less collapsed and was buried. And of course, there was no religion of Buddhism outside Asia. So he sort of lived his life to change those aspects. So he wanted to change the world. And that was the fundamental criteria of his work and mission. He wanted to revive the people of his homeland, to live up to their legacy, to protect not only Buddhism, but to be cognizant of the real meanings of the tenets of Buddhism. He worked with the clergy, and he worked with other people as well in socially reforming the country at a time when the British were, as I said, quite brutal towards Sri Lanka. But his message was of and compassion. So with the sword of righteousness, he combated these great threats to Sri Lanka and to the Buddhist firmament that was around at the time. His life overall is regarded as one of leading Protestant Buddhism. That term I'm somewhat confused myself, but it sort of borrows from Christian missionary language, which meant that he wanted to borrow the techniques that other religions had in terms of spreading Buddhism. He was keen for that to be done not only by monastics, but lay people as well. And we must remember also that Anagarika, for a very large part of his life, was a lay person. He was an Anagarika. If we look back at his birth and his early life, he was born into a righteous family from Sri Lanka, the Hevavithana family, who were from an affluent background, but they were devoutly Buddhist. And the young Anagarika was a very pious person who, at a very early stage, wanted to be a renouncer. He is believed to have suffered an injury before the age of 10, which, as the result of which he had a withered right leg. And this injury lasted right through his life, and it caused him great discomfort and pain. But he was nevertheless determined to one day try and become a monk or lead a monastic life. And he did that by taking out various vows, renunciating worldly pleasures. He was a celibate person. By all accounts, he was a very keen vegetarian. And he renounced violence. So he wanted to lead a life that was very akin to the life that was known about Buddhist followers in ancient India, who were renouncers. And his aim was actually to lead a Bodhisattva life, a life that would one day lead to becoming a Buddha himself. When in his late teens, there were, at the time in Sri Lanka, the great debates had happened between Buddhists and Christians, the Panadura debates. And he had learned about those and the victories that the Buddhists had over the Christians. He then came across the characters of the Theosophists who visited Sri Lanka, and he was taken up by people like Madame Helena Blavatsky and Henry Steele Olcott, who were people who embraced Buddhism from a theosophical perspective. And that friendship and that kinship with them led him to inspire his own life towards a life of spiritualism. And he became, I think first was attached to the Theosophical Society, and he went to India to help the branch there, I think in Calcutta. And from there, he made his first visit to Bodh Gaya. He had also by that time met and received encouragement from Edwin Arnold, who had written the Light of Asia, which had translated the life of the Buddha into an English poem. It was a huge bestseller at the time. And Arnold had already visited some of the holy sites, Buddhist holy sites in India, and encouraged the young Dharmapala to do the same. And when he visited Bodh Gaya, Anagarika visited Bodh Gaya, I think there was a great sense of shame that he experienced, because here was the religion that he had been inspired by, and it was being desecrated. It was in ruins. It was not given any prominence, and it was largely buried. And more importantly, it was not in the hands of Buddhists. So it is said that he rested his head on the Vajrayana stone where the Buddha gained enlightenment, and made a vow that he would not move until Bodh Gaya was restored. And that was one of his great life missions. And when I look at Bodh Gaya now, and I had the great pleasure of coming to India in March and visiting the Maha Bodhi temple in Bodh Gaya, it's a scene of great joy. There are hundreds of pilgrims coming every day from all the different traditions of Buddhism, in harmony, worshipping and praying and meditating at this great site. And I'm sure our great founder would be enormously happy of this outcome. It is the accomplishment of his life that Bodh Gaya is now the preeminent Buddhist site in the world, as it rightly should be. But it was a great struggle to get from when he first saw Bodh Gaya to where we are today. So that was one of his obviously great victories, although it didn't happen in his lifetime. We are the benefactors of the work that he made. And then when I was traveled further in India, and I came to Kushinagar, to Lumbini and Sarnath, I came across the Muluganda Kuti Vihara in Sarnath, which is the temple that Anagarika built. And then you come into that great temple, that beautiful temple, and one of the first things you see is a memorial stone that commemorates Mary Foster for the great work and help that she gave to Anagarika in building that temple. So we are rightly honoring Mary Foster for her huge contribution. So how did these two important people meet? Well, following on from Anagarika's work at the Theosophical movement, in 1890, he founded the Maha Bodhi Society in India, which is the organization that you are all from. And the purpose of that, as we discussed earlier, was to re-establish the holy sites of Buddhism in India, especially at Bodh Gaya. And in the endeavor of telling the world about the story of Buddhism, he was encouraged to attend the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. I believe that was his first journey to the West. He was still in his 20s, a very young man. And he made the journey initially to London by ship, and he was met by Edwin Arnold. And from there, he traveled to New York and then to Chicago, where the World Parliament of Religions took place. And of course, that was a very iconic moment, not only in Anagarika's life, but in world life. That World Parliament of Religions is still talked about today. If you go to Chicago, as I have, the room in which the Parliament of Religions had its conference is still there. It's a beautiful space. And Anagarika represented Southern Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism to that great audience. And he was there with Swami Vivekananda, who represented the Hindu faith, and there were other Eastern religions also there. And the remarkable effect that appearance and the speech that he gave at that conference still reverberates today. And I believe he spent his 29th birthday in Chicago, just before or after his speech there at the World Parliament of Religions. And then when it was time to leave Chicago, he did so again by traveling west to San Francisco, and he took a boat then to travel all the way back to British Ceylon, and that boat probably took him to Japan. But before he got to Japan, the boat stopped at Honolulu. And by all records, Anagarika never actually got off the boat. But he was met by people from Honolulu who wanted to meet him because by that time, the news of his speech at the World Parliament of Religions had even reached the people of Hawaii. And one of those people was Mary Foster. So let me just talk a little bit about Mary Foster. Mary Michaela Robinson Foster was born in 1844. There are many parallels to her circumstances than that of Anagarika. One of those being that she also came from an affluent family. Her father, in fact, was British and had founded a shipbuilding company. At the age of 16, Mary Foster was married to a Thomas Foster who was working for her father's shipbuilding company. By all accounts, it was a happy marriage, but they were childless. In 1889, Thomas Foster passed away, and Mary Foster was left widowed and childless at age 45. 1893, the same year that the World Parliament of Religions happened, was a momentous year for Mary Foster personally and also for Hawaii generally. Mary Foster was probably connected and maybe even slightly related to the monarchy or the royalty in Hawaii, and her good friend was Queen Lilu Kulani. And she was the reigning monarch of Hawaii at the time, but she was overthrown by American soldiers. and imprisoned by the Americans. And in fact, Mary Foster was one of only 2 or 3 people who visited the jailed monarch at that time. So the ordinary people of Hawaii wanted to rally and support their monarch. And Mary Foster actually took up a position in that protest as leader of the Hawaiian Women's Patriotic League. And she was asked to lead some of the negotiations between the Hawaii people and the American government. But by all accounts, this left her, there was a dispute amongst the Hawaiians, and she resigned her position, leaving Mary Foster deeply troubled and traumatized by the condition of her own friend and the condition of Hawaii as a whole. And it was in that moment of personal upheaval that she decided to meet the speaker from Sri Lanka, or from Ceylon at the time, who was visiting Honolulu. And she wanted to hear from him about what he was saying about Buddhism. And when they met, it was obviously a critical meeting for both of their lives. We are led to believe that Mary Foster explained the troubles that she was personally having, which was giving her mental health problems, headaches, and other things. And in return, Anagarika Dharmapala told her not to worry and to explain some of the truths of Buddhism, that love conquers hatred, and taught her about mindfulness and some meditation techniques. And it was those practices which Mary Foster tried, and it is said that eased her pain, her mental pain. So that was the initial time that they met, and it had a profound impression, made a profound impression on both of them. Anagarika Dharmapala told Mary Foster about his life, about how presumably he was also from a small island country, Ceylon at the time, which was dominated by colonial powers, in that case British, in which a country where Buddhism, his faith, this great teaching, was under great threat. And so there were many similarities between their experiences. And that must have resonated with Mary Foster. And when she heard that Anagarika's life was going to be dedicated towards the restoration of Bodh Gaya, of Buddhism in India, a huge country where Buddhism had more or less disappeared, she also wanted to know more about that work. And I understand that Anagarika promised that she would be updated by regular correspondence from the Maha Bodhi Society. And we believe that the journals of the Maha Bodhi Society were regularly sent to Mary Foster in Honolulu. So that connection then was established. I don't think Anagarika realized probably at that time how momentous that meeting was in his life, but he realized it was a very important connection that he had established. And over the years, as our president just mentioned, Anagarika Dharmapala regarded Mary Foster as his foster mother in a literal sense, because she was untiring in compassion and philanthropy towards helping the cause of the Maha Bodhi Society. And we are the beneficiaries of that generosity and that philanthropy. In addition to the Muluganda Kuti Vihara in Asana, London Buddhist Vihara was founded in 1926 based on funds provided principally by Mary Foster. The first, in the decision that Anagarika made to build a temple in Britain is really quite astounding at that time, when you consider the circumstances that were happening in the world and in Britain at the time. Here was a man whose family had been subjugated to all sorts of threats and from the British people, who had been kept under house arrest, I believe, in Calcutta by the British. He decided that he would spread the message and the seed of the Dhamma right in the heart of the British Empire in London. And he wanted to offer the Buddha Dhamma to the British people. So it became a lifelong passion that he wanted to establish a temple, a monastery in London. There was at that time, there was no diaspora to speak of Sri Lankan people living in England in the early 1920s. There were very few Buddhists. The only Buddhist organization at the time in England was the Buddhist Society, or the Buddhist Lodge, which had just started in 1924 under the guidance of Christmas Humphreys. And Anagarika came and met Humphreys in London, and they discussed the establishment of a monastery. And Anagarika's vision was that it needed monks to spread Buddhism. It was no good just ordinary lay people discussing and explaining Buddhism by academic speeches and texts. You needed people who were willing to make the vows to become monks, to become monastics, to actually let the people see what a real Buddhist is. So Anagarika's vision was to have a temple, a monastery. And that was always the case. So in 1926, with the funds that Mary Foster offered and provided, he was able to purchase a house in Ealing, on Madeley Road, to be precise, which still exists today. That was renamed Foster House in honor of the benefactress who funded it. And that was the start of the London Buddhist Vihara. And since then, we are approaching now our 100th year next year. We have flourished as a community. Initially, London Buddhist Vihara was predominantly, the followers were British people. And their names are recorded in various texts and photographs across the British Maha Bodhi Society journals, which are at the Vihara now, today. Over time, obviously, the Vihara changed. We acquired new premises, more spacious premises, and we moved. We had more monks coming with us. We also had the Second World War, which impeded our progress. And then we came back after the war with a property initially in Knightsbridge, a very affluent area of West London. And then we moved to Chiswick in 1965, which is the suburb of West London, where we currently are, which is a very affluent suburb of West London, a beautiful place if you ever want to visit. And we were initially in Heathfield Gardens in a house, and from 1965 until 1994. And in 1994, we purchased a much larger premises, which is where we are now. So we've been there about 30 years. And that is in a place called Bedford Park of Chiswick. and it used to be a society and a club. We're very honored to be in this area of London. It's a very easily accessible part of London where people can come and readily visit. We're very near a popular tube station and the district line, and we're part of the Chiswick fabric. We're regularly attending events across the community. Our head monk is now the Chief Sanghanayaka, Venerable Sila Vimala. Is the London Buddhist Vihara is still the premier Buddhist monastery in the UK. Our head monk is given the honor of being having the title of Chief Sanghanayaka of Great Britain, and because we're a Sri Lankan monk, Sri Lankan temple, we are given a pride of place in national occasions in Britain. So, for example, things like the remembrance service for the wars. Buddhism is represented by our head monk, as well as many state occasions like the funeral of the Queen, the marriage of the future king, the coronation of the king, King Charles III. We are very closely associated with the state establishment, and that is that is almost certainly because of the high standards that Anagarika Dharmapala instilled in our proceedings. So those honors that we enjoy today are very much due to Anagarika Dharmapala. And the fact that the temple exists today is so much because of Mary Foster and the life and the philanthropy that she offered to us in Britain, a country that she never visited. Okay. We're led to believe that Mary Foster may have traveled to California and San Francisco. She may have gone to Japan, I think, but she never traveled outside of that to the Asia, in broader sense of Asia in the subcontinent, in India or Sri Lanka, and she never came to Britain either. So these enormous gifts that she made, she would have heard and read about them, but she never personally saw them. But she trusted the people whom she had given the money to know that she was doing it for the right cause and for the right reasons. So here we are. What I'd like to open the debate or the discussion for future speakers to consider is where is the legacy now for organizations such as ourselves, like the Maha Society of India, the British Maha Society, London Buddhist Vihara, all of those whose lives have been impacted by Anagarika Dharmapala and Mary Foster. They are two enormous towering influences in the spreading of Buddhism. What is their legacy for us today? I can answer part of that from the work that the British Maha Society is doing now. I took over as secretary of the British Maha Society in 2023 at the invitation of the Anagarika Dharmapala Trust in Colombo. And they wanted me to revive the British Maha Society, to revive its work and the mission that the Anagarika had set. And if I can just remind you of the words that he actually said. He wanted to give the British people and all the inhabitants of the United Kingdom the gift of the sublime teachings of the Buddha Dhamma. Okay, so this was not an ambition that he wanted just for Sri Lankan people or just for Indian people or just for Asian people. His vision was global. In that sense, I believe that Anagarika Dharmapala and indeed Mary Foster were universalists. They came from two small island communities who were under great threat. And through love and compassion, they decided that love conquered hatred, and that the way to change the world was through compassion and the offering of the right path, the middle path to emancipation. So today, what the British Mahabodhi offers is the dissemination of Buddhism to anyone who wants to enjoy that. Our primary focus is in English, and our primary audience is in the United Kingdom and the Western world. If Anagarika, or Mary Foster for that matter, were living today, they would undoubtedly be using social media, the computers, the internet. You know, Anagarika himself, who traveled prolifically all his life, did so before the age of jet planes. And yet, through great hardship, he used to take long journeys on ships, whether it be from Sri Lanka or India to Asian countries like Japan and Thailand and Burma, or to America. These journeys would have taken weeks. And he was a man of not great health, who was a vegetarian, who would have had difficulties eating the food that he wanted to eat on these journeys, even when he arrived. But painstakingly, he did this. A journey to London would have taken probably about 3 months. Today, we can do that in under a day. And even today, we can do without any travel at all, like on a Zoom seminar as we're having today. So the internet connects us all. So bringing back down to the current day, what we try to do at the British Mahabodhi Society is to have all our events as hybrid events. So we have most of our events at the London Buddhist Vihara, but we make them open and accessible to anyone in the world. So it would be like as if you're in the audience in the Vihara, even if you're sitting in Calcutta or Tokyo or Honolulu or San Francisco. You would be connected to Buddhism at the same time as everyone else. And that is what we want to offer. We propose, so we have regular events that are on a monthly basis, which discuss various aspects of Buddhism. In fact, we had an event in February this year on Mary Foster specifically, and Professor Bimalandra Kumar was very gracious enough to be a participant in that and spoke from Varanasi for us. And we had about 9 speakers from all parts of the world, from Honolulu, from New York, from Sri Lanka, and London as well. The head monk spoke on behalf of the London Buddhist Vihara. So those are the sort of expansive, inclusive arrangements that we would like to pursue, because Buddhism is not for any particular community. It is for everyone. It is for all humanity. And that is the vision that Anagarika had. He was fundamentally, as I say, a universalist. And I would, I know there are many biographies of Anagarika written in India, in Sri Lanka, but there's also several that are written abroad. And the one I find most illuminating is this one, which I don't know if you can see clearly. There you are, you might see it now. It's called Rescued for the Nation, I beg your pardon, Rescued from the Nation by Stephen Kemper. It was written about 10 years ago. He is a well-known scholar from Bates University, who is a close friend of Venerable Sivali, I know, because he has appeared on Mahabodhi Society of India's broadcast before. And he has written a book which I think covers the holistic life of Anagarika Dharmapala, and explains that, you know, that he was fundamentally concerned with the fate of humanity. His life was dedicated to all of humanity. And that is what inspires me still to this day, that how someone from, 160 years ago, with limited knowledge of the world, could come to those conclusions. We are endowed with so much information about the world, and we hardly see many people who have the spiritual sense to unite the world. But that is the vision that Anagarika had. And we applaud him and honor him for that. And that we applaud and honor Mary Foster for being such a supporter of Anagarika and sharing his vision of spreading Buddhism to all humanity. I think I've spoken for quite a while, and longer than that I had anticipated. So I would like to listen to the other distinguished speakers and scholars that we have on this platform and learn from them and contribute in whatever way I can. So thank you again to Venerable Sivali, to all my friends at the Maha Bodhi Society of India, especially you, Mahendra, for inviting me. Thank you so much. Namo Buddhaya.